talk too much. You talk exactly the right amount.
Ah. I'm sure they just like a change of pace. Like, oh, this is a different curly-haired brunette white lady who's talking to me. I think, well, we probably are related. You know, the whole Ashkenazi thing. Oh, man, this is such a good group.
I would say you can go ahead and get started.
Cool. So, good evening, everybody, for this class, this session, this program on Judaism and sorcery and spirits, you know, witchcraft and what one might call ghosts. I have this thing, and it's definitely, it's a me problem, that I can't imagine anyone else in the world is interested in like the really weird niche stuff that I'm interested in. So I pitch ideas to Jennifer Rosenzweig, our program director. I say, hey, Jennifer, we could do like this thing. And then she says, okay, like teach it. And then it turns out I'm not the only one interested in these weird little niche things. And then I kick myself for not making like a 3-part, you know, thing. And I have to like, oh God, I like really condense it down into an hour. And that's because there's a lot of stuff to talk about now. And it occurs to me it would be better as like a 3-part series, but also, you know, like it'd be 3 parts and you'd have to like come. So maybe it's better that we kind of just do it in 1 hour. But, you know, if there's like a real clamoring, people want more witchcraft and Judaism and more spirits. So there's so much stuff. Then, you know, I'm sure we could work something out, so just let us know. We're happy to adapt. We are happy to adapt to the needs. And we know we have folks all over the country who tune in. So, you know, just let us know what you like to learn about and we can expand. But this is going to be an hour. It's going to be we're going to get this done. Hour. It's going to be not so much a deep dive as I would say, expansive gloss. Because there's a lot of really big ideas. And we're going to try to just kind of display them for you. The whole reason I was interested in doing this is because, and I don't know how you grew up, but I know the way I grew up, I was taught that in Judaism, we are a rational religion. You know, other cultures and other people and other religions have, you know, mythology and superstition, but we are a logical, rational people. And I thought that for a very, very long time. And, you know, we have lines in the Torah, and I was familiar, and I know a lot of y'all are familiar too, but these lines in the Torah that say, you know, thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. Okay, well, it seems very straightforward right there, and no witch to live. Fine, you know, do not consult with a necromancer or someone who conjures spirits of the dead. Okay, well, that seems pretty straightforward. And I was taught, I kind of had this mode of thinking about them, that it's because those things aren't real. That Judaism does not believe, which is anyone who says that, you need to like weigh very carefully what they're telling you, because we are a 1,000-year-old tradition of lots of different people and cultures, and it's a weighty statement to say. Judaism doesn't think those things are real. That's why you can't suffer a witch to live. That's why you can't conjure spirits of the dead, because they're not real. Okay, well, then I went to rabbinical school and I started studying a lot of our texts, very, very deep dive. And one of my teachers really put it best. We were reading what was really just straight potions, essentially, ancient potions that our rabbis were teaching, and witchcraft and spirits. And one of my teachers said it best, and he said, the rabbis don't tell you don't do these things, don't mess around with witchcraft, don't mess around with spirits, because they're not real. They very much so believed that all of these things were real. Of course they were real. It didn't even occur to them that you would believe that they weren't real. Of course they were real. They knew. Everybody knows that sorcery is real, obviously. They didn't want you messing around with it for other reasons. But it's not because it wasn't real. It's not because it was superstition. They definitely believed that these things were real and active and in our lives. So I want to explore them with you through text. Now I have to share a screen. Sharing the screen. Boom. So first, oh gosh. You guys can unmute yourselves, I assume, right? Jennifer can unmute themselves? Cool. So first, I'm just gonna read this part because it's just faster. We get these two lines. I'm gonna show you stuff from Torah and Tanakh first. First line, Exodus. Many people are familiar with it. You shall not tolerate or suffer a sorceress to live. It specifically is the feminine version, sorceress. Okay, that seems very straightforward. Later, Deuteronomy. Let no one be found among you, you Jews, who consigns his or their son or daughter to a fire. So you can't throw your kids into a fire. Who is an augur, who is a soothsayer, a diviner, actually not say that. A sorcerer, one who casts spells, one who consults ghosts or familiar spirits, or one who inquires of the dead. None of those can be found amongst your ranks, you Jews. Seems straightforward, right? All right. Knowing that information, as seems to be abundantly clear, let's all go see now all these times when, these things pop up in our tradition. As soon as, and I put some dates in here just so you have an idea. This is a very, very famous story, often called the Witch of Endor, but technically, I didn't put it in the Hebrew and I'm sorry, but I really wanted to save space. Technically, she's not known as a witch at any point in this text. She is simply a woman. And as background, we have King Saul, the famous King Saul. He is it king? He has some issues. He has a lot of territory problems. He's at war with various people. And he has this young upstart named David, who his own children prefer to him. That's a problem. And David, as we know, is kind of gonna, be the next king and gonna be a pretty good king. So Saul is a little bit nervous. Saul, like every good king, has his very own prophet. That's very normal for those times. Problem is, as we start the story of the witch/woman of Endor, Samuel dies. So someone who's not me, because my voice, I think gets very annoying after a while. First paragraph. Just unmute yourself and start talking. I don't have patience for the whole raising your hand thing. I'll call on people whose faces I recognize. That threat doesn't help.
A question, what's the difference between a prophet and a diviner, in a sense? And this person is, they're both trying to tell you the future. Maybe one's more straightforward than the other.
Right, and I mean, it begs the question, like if a prophet is talking about what's going to happen, then what's the difference between a prophet who tells you what's going to happen and an augur or a diviner or somebody who's telling you what's going to happen? The rabbis do debate this. We don't get into it because I felt like I was already devoting so much time to witchcraft. Not like practicing it, but talking about it. Couple parts of that. One is that if what they say is true, literally, that's one of the things. If it's true, well, then it was good. Two, prophets truly do access God. Like prophets aren't saying what's going to happen because they can somehow see the future. Prophets access God. And God kind of, prophets are kind of like the fulcrum between God and the people / the ruler at the time. There were professional prophets and there were kind of prophets for hire. A diviner would be someone who kind of uses things, stones, or through dreams or through other, uses stuff to try to commune with God or gods or the dead. And prophets don't truck with that. It's a good question.
Quick, Joseph, dreams, predicting the future again.
His dreams were sent by God. We're talking about the not direct connection to God people.
Okay.
That's all. Those are the ones the rabbis were more worried with, which I think really underlines a lot of the rabbis' anxiety was that, if God's talking to you, then clearly this is something about God. But people who aren't talking to God or communicating or communing with God, but are somehow looking into the future or who are talking to spirits who are telling them things, that was something so outside of how they thought the world should work. And there's a certain danger, I think, to that. I think it's a really, really good question. I want to ask, sorry, this is not personal, but I think these are great questions. I love them. Hold them till we get a little further on, but I love that you asked them, especially now is a good time. And you know what? Since you've already volunteered, that's a problem with ever raising your hand in class. Could you read the first paragraph so we can learn about this witch woman?
Sure. Now Samuel had died, and Saul had forbidden ghosts and familiar spirits in the land. And I can't, hang on, I can't see the rest of this. The Philistines mustered. When Saul saw the Philistine force, his heart trembled with fear. And Saul inquired of God, but God did not answer him, either by dream or by Urim or by prophets.
Okay, so Saul has the problem that kings have when their prophets died. They can't talk to God anymore because the prophet was the fulcrum between God and the king. So Saul, like, what do I do? I need to know what to do about this Philistine force that's about to attack my people and my army. And I know I've got a lot of other issues. So Saul says, you know what? Maybe I'll just try talking to God directly. Saul tries talking to God. God does not answer him. And Saul tries every way he can think of. He tries using his dreams, tries using Urim, which are basically magical stones, and that's a whole conversation. Tries consulting other prophets because there are other prophets. God does not want to talk to Saul. Saul is in trouble. Then Saul said to his courtiers, I'm just going to try and whip us through this. Find me a woman who consults ghosts so I can inquire through her. And his courtiers told him there was a woman in Endor who consulted ghosts. So Saul disguised himself and set out with 2 men. They came to the woman by night, and he said, please divine for me a ghost that I shall name for you. The woman answered him, you know what Saul has banned ghosts and familiar spirits in the land. Are you laying a trap for me to get killed? Saul Saul knows that, one, he told people no more ghosts. And it's not clear from the Hebrew that Saul said either don't commune with ghosts, don't try to talk to ghosts, or Saul said no more ghosts. It's not clear. His courtier said, well, okay, well, there actually is a woman who does talk to ghosts if you want to, even though we're not allowed to do that anymore, technically. Saul disguises himself, goes find this woman. This woman says, you know, Saul has banned ghosts, so are you trying to get me killed? And Saul says, oh, I swear on God. Can you imagine? On God, you won't get in trouble. The woman says, who should I bring up for you? And he said, bring up Samuel. The woman recognized Samuel and she shrieks. She says, you're Saul. And the king says, don't be afraid. What do you see? And she says, I see a divine being coming up from the earth. This is literally, by the way, in the book of Samuel. Ghosts being summoned. Ghosts of prophets. What does he look like? Saul asked her. Well, she said, it's an old man wrapped in a robe. And then he knew it was Samuel and he bowed low to the ground. So Saul finds a woman who can bring up ghosts, and she does. There we go. Samuel says, which is, I think, a very fair thing to say, why are you bothering me? I'm dead. Leave me alone. Okay. Saul says, I'm in trouble because the Philistines are attacking me and God has turned away from me and doesn't answer to me either by prophets or in dreams. Interesting that he doesn't say he's been using the Urim, which are the magic stones. Interesting. So tell me what I'm going to do. And then I took it out just for the sake of space. But basically, Samuel says, you are in trouble. I'm not going to help you because God doesn't like you anymore. And you're not going to be king, David is. So Saul knows he's in trouble. Saul flings himself from the ground. It's interesting. He has no strength. He hasn't eaten anything. And the woman, this woman who communes with ghosts, this witch, as she's known later, even though she is not a witch in any way that we would identify as being, she feeds him and tells him to rest. And he does, and he rests up, and then he leaves, which is interesting that they would even bother putting that in the story, Samuel, which would have been written after his death, because of course, by this point, he is dead. So I wanted to bring the story in first because it shows kind of the bringing together, and because it's really hard to kind of unknit them in kind of ancient Jewish thought through medieval Jewish thought, that summoning spirits and the fact that there are spirits and sorcery and witchcraft are kind of knit together. And you can see that it's hard to say where one ends and the other one begins. That being said, we're going to look at specific examples. First of all, is there such thing as real magic? Again, just in case anyone ever asks. If you grew up like me, like, oh no, Jews don't believe there's magic. Untrue. Daniel Bissonette, can you read in the English about magic tricks?
You're talking about starting with the necromancer?
Starting with the necromancer. Good
Okay, a necromancer is a pitum from whose armpit the voice of the dead speaks, appears to speak. And a sorcerer is one from whose mouth the dead appears to speak. These, the necromancer and the sorcerer, are executed by stoning, and one who inquires about the future through them is in violation of a prohibition.
Okay, so just pause. So what are the two figures we're talking about here?
A necromancer and a sorcerer.
Necromancer and a sorcerer. And there's the Mishnah here. So the Mishnah is filling in kind of, the Torah says, you can't have necromancy, you can't have sorcery. Okay. You can't suffer them to live. Okay. But then the Mishnah, our ancient rabbis who are looking over the Torah saying, that's a great idea. Cool. What are we supposed to do with it? So they're figuring out, legally speaking, what are you supposed to do with these folks? So they think, well, you got to stone them to death. But the one who inquires, the one who says, like, oh, I want to talk to the dead to find out some information. Do we have to kill them too? Well, no, they're in violation of a prohibition. This is a legal term. They're going to be punished, but they're not going to be killed. Okay, now let's talk about real sorcery, real magic versus, sleight of hand. Next paragraph, please.
The warlock, which I thought was a weird word to put here, but whatever. A warlock is also
This is a male man performing magic as opposed to a witch.
Yeah, I thought it was Old English, but whatever. Is also liable to be executed by a stoning. One who performs a real act of sorcery is liable, but one who deceives the eyes, making it appear as though he is performing sorcery, as that is not considered sorcery. Rabbi Akiva says in the name of Rabbi Yehoshua, for example, two people can each gather cucumbers by sorcery.
Of course.
I'm sorry, I'm going to start laughing.
Yeah, no. It's like they're dead serious. They're not joking. They don't really do jokes. I mean, they talk about jokes in other parts that are not fit for, public.
One of them gathers cucumbers and he is exempt, and the other one gathers cucumbers and he is liable. How so? The one who performs a real act of sorcery is liable, and the one who deceives the eyes is exempt.
So there's just like a lot of layers to that, I would say. One, there's real sorcery. Two, there's sleight of hand. There's magic tricks, pulling quarters out from behind your ear. Three, apparently you can use sorcery to gather cucumbers, which seems like a really great, useful use of magic. Hold on to all those parts because you're going to want them kind of going forward. So there is real magic. There is pretend magic. Real magic gets you in trouble. Pretend magic,
What's
You're
the
fine.
significance of the armpit?
God, I really wish I had time to figure that one out, to delve into, but it's so weird that they're saying pitom, and I don't know why. I don't know. I wish I knew. I can look it up. I will look it up now on my own time, not in our precious hour, and if I find anything interesting, I'll send it to you. And my next time I guest teach your class, I'll bring it in.
Perhaps speaking out of one's armpit is a more polite way of saying speaking out of one's other orifice.
Oh yeah, like speaking, out of your.
What is a cocoon?
I don't know what it means in this context. And generally speaking, when this is Steinsaltz, and if he keeps the original, he doesn't bother translating it into English. It means it's too.
Is it like an obscenity or an expletive?
No, not as an obscenity, but it's that it doesn't translate well directly into really anything. That it's a term, and it is what it is, basically. That's how Steinsaltz tends to approach that, and I'll look it up because that is really fascinating to me. In the interest of time, hold on to those questions because they're fun. And remember the whole cucumbers thing because it comes up again. Witches versus warlocks. We touched on this earlier. So we know you can't suffer a witch to live. Okay. But, what about a warlock? What about men performing magic? Is there a difference between men performing magic and women performing magic? Fascinating. Karen, since I know you're on here and I know you love witchcraft, could you read for me the Pirkei Avot?
Rabban Gamliel used to say, the more flesh, the more worms, the more property, the more anxiety, the more women or wives, depending on how you translate it, the more witchcraft.
Oh, so this is it's a very famous part of Pirkei Avot, where it's the more this, the more that, the more this, the more that. And there's a great line, and it's true, it depends kind of how you translate the word nashim, which means women, in plural is, plural of woman, but also could mean wives. And back in those times, you could certainly have multiple wives. So it could really go either way. But the point is, Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, written around the same time as the Mishnah. Well, written is such a term, but we're going to say compiled around the same time as the Mishnah, around 200 CE. The more women you got kicking around your house, the more witchcraft. Okay, that seems to be a thing. We're building kind of a case here. All right, interesting. Who else is on here? Someone want to read about witches and women? Or I'll just start calling on women who I know would really appreciate this. Liz Vincent, can you read the part of Sanhedrin? So we're later, now we're in the Talmud, so it's several hundred years later, approximately. There's a lot of overlap in saying it's 300 years later, such an oversimplification, but just approximate. Please, Sanhedrin.
Okay. The case of the warlock is referring to one who performs a real act of sorcery.
Right, as opposed to fake sorcery, yes indeed.
The sages taught in Baraita,
yeah.
Baraita, the verse, "You shall not allow a witch to live," does not refer only to a female who practices sorcery, but a man and a woman, thank God both, are included. If so, why does verse state a witch? This is because most women are familiar with witchcraft. Okay, that's a little discriminatory. But at least it's equal, both men and women.
Right, so and it brings up the line, and it says that line is, when it says you can't suffer a witch to live, the rabbis themselves are looking back and they're reading into it, saying, well, it means that you can't let warlocks or witches live. None of them. They all gotta go. But then why would it say that, and goes on the text or the rabbis talking amongst themselves? Well, then why does it say a witch? Well, because apparently most women are familiar with witchcraft, which I really feel that I need to know more witchcraft because I don't think I'm that familiar. I mean, now I'm more familiar, but if you're a woman and you're watching this, you clearly need to learn a little more witchcraft, unless you know a lot, in which case, good for you. Most of us are familiar. Cool. Who wants to read from Eruvin? No, yeah, that's fair, Sharon.
I'll read.
Please.
Mar said previously, one may not pass by food, rather one must treat the food with respect and pick it up. Rabbi Yohanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, they taught this ruling only in the early generations, when Jewish women were not accustomed to using witchcraft. However, in the later generations, when Jewish women are accustomed to using witchcraft, one may pass by food as a spell might have been cast on the bread, and one must not put himself in unnecessary danger.
I like the faces. I hope you guys are also looking at the gallery view here because I'm seeing so many interesting faces here. So there's a couple layers to this. One is kind of there's food and how you treat food, and food has to be treated with respect. And if there's food that has fallen, you certainly can you just walk by, or do you have to pick it up? There's an issue with food on the ground, and can it contract disease/demons? That's like a whole thing. So the Talmud, this is again still Talmud, a little bit later than Mishnah. Well, you can't pass by any foods. You have to pick it up. And well, that's only early generations. Jewish women were not accustomed to using witchcraft, but as time went on, Jewish women became more accustomed to doing witchcraft, and possibly could put a spell on things like bread that you might encounter and then be in danger because of. So getting bogged down in the details of how you cast a spell on bread and I'm almost less interested in that than just to really communicate to you that I hope you see and hear the ancient and a little bit later but still ancient rabbis have this anxiety about women performing witchcraft, women engaging with sorcery and witchcraft, and it seems like it's often malevolent. Again, you're only seeing a smidgen. There's a lot of other parts. And that's just talking ancient, not even getting into medieval. There's a lot of anxiety that the rabbis have over women engaging with witchcraft. And that's not a positive thing.
Can I ask a question? Could it be more about power? I mean, if women are witches, they would be able to cast a spell, and then they would have power over the men, and being able to control, and especially the men did not want women controlling them.
I think that's an interesting thought to have on it. I want you to hold on to that and hold on to it as we move into, because there's going to be new information that's going to come up, and I'm going to be interested to hear like how does that affect how you're thinking after that. But hold on to that. That's really, that should be its own session. I could do all about women and witchcraft and Judaism, because that would be a lot. We're gonna leave women behind a little bit. Shocking. And look at men. First, this is just to kind of reassure people who might be thinking maybe it's metaphorical. If you took the class on demons with me, you've seen this, so we're not gonna, and I see there's a lot of people who've seen it. Well, not all of you, but a lot of you have. Demons become really important here. Demons and stuff that has to do with demons, which would include witchcraft. Maybe this is a metaphor for something. No, if you're ever worried that things like demons and witchcraft or everything related to this are metaphors, no, because the rabbis literally say how you literally find literal demons in your literal house. You put ashes around your bed and you'll see their footprints, because demons have footprints and they look like chickens' footprints. And there's even a potion, I think that's how you would really describe it, of if you wanted to see demon footprints, and maybe any of you have cats and want to do this, you could see the demon footprints in your own house by doing this, I would say magic. If you take the afterbirth, I'm just reading in the English, the afterbirth of a firstborn female black cat, so female black cat, interesting, born to a firstborn female black cat, burn it in a fire, grind it and put it in your eyes, and then you'll be able to see demons. And if you put, but then you have to put those ashes in a tube and seal it, because then the demons will try to steal it and they might harm you. And this is actually followed by a story of a guy who did this, and the demons did harm him, and the other rabbis had to pray for him, and then he was fine. So just in case you're wondering, maybe the rabbis really were rational and they're just talking in metaphors. This doesn't seem very metaphorical to me. Just saying. So there's different kinds of sorcery. Okay. There is sorcery via incantation. Some of these you'll be familiar with, actually. So some of these incantations, I bet you have actually said. Who'd like to read this example? Please,
I'll read
Anne.
it.
Please.
See, the incantation to drive away demons, which is exactly what I need right now.
Oh, good.
Rabbi Yitzhak said, anyone who recites Shema in their bed, it is as if they hold a double-edged sword, guarding against all evil, as it is stated, high praises of God in their mouths and a double-edged sword in their hands.
Okay, and just pause really quick. So this is just Gemara. This is just the Talmud. If you say the Shema, it's as if you held a double-edged sword in your hands, which protects against evil. And just in case you're thinking, well, maybe we just look at him and think he's being metaphorical, Rashi, way later, 13th century French, German, Ashkenaz, essentially, he has this explanation. Please.
It is as if they hold a double-edged sword with which to kill mazikin.
Mazikin are a kind of demons. So if you are being besieged by mazikin, certain kind of demon, specifically at night, perhaps in your dreams, then you should say the Shema, this incantation, if you will, and it will kill those demons, and you will not be pestered by them anymore. So, bet you didn't know we were teaching witchcraft in Hebrew school when we taught the kids the Shema. Okay, what if we want something a little crazier? Awesome. Let's talk about blindness demons. You want to read this one, Anna?
Okay. Incantations to drink blindness demon infested water.
Yes, so let's say you want to drink a certain kind of water, but it is infested with blindness demons. There's an incantation for that, please.
Oh. The sages taught a person should not drink water from rivers or from ponds at night. And if they drank, their blood is upon their own head due to the danger. The Gemara explains, what is this danger? The danger of Shabrireh.
Yes, so I'm trying to just interject and explain. There's a whole bunch of stuff in Talmud and Gemara about demons and how to kind of get rid of them and how to get them to leave you alone and who is at risk from demons. They thought particularly scholars, Torah scholars, are really at risk of demonic attack. And there are also situations that you could put yourself in that could put you at risk of demonic attack. One being that water at night, natural waterways, don't get the whole discussion. Water outside, ponds, rivers, were demon magnets. And your own blood is on your head. You know, it's your fault. You know that they're dangerous places to be. What is the danger of Shavri Ray, which was it was a demon and also was linked to blindness. But what are you going to do if you're walking around outside, as one does, and you are just so thirsty and there's a pond right there, but you know that there's the blindness demon, the Shavri Ray lives in that. What do? Thank God. Thanks for the rabbis. There is an incantation to save you. A little bit of magic you can do to save you from this demon. What is that magic? You know.
You say Shavri B'Rire Rire Yiri. I thirst for water in white cups. This is an incantation against those demons.
Yeah, it's like if you're with someone else, apparently all you have to do is say like, "Hey, that's the person I'm with. I'm so thirsty," and poof, the demons just go away. But if you're by yourself, you say to yourself, and interesting, I'm just reading it. It says, you should say to yourself, "Self, my mother," invoking the mother, interesting, "said to me, beware of Shavri Ray," which is this demon. And then you say the name, Shavri Ray, Bire Ray, Re. So what are we doing to the name of this demon? You are diminishing it until it's all gone. With this incantation, you're verbally kind of smushing it down until it's gone completely. And you say, "I thirst for water in white cups." White. Interesting. So we've got another incantation here. Helpful if you ever, want to drink water from a pond at night. And if you ever do drink water from a pond at night, let me know how it goes. And if you use the incantation and if it helps. Always curious to see. What other kinds of magic do the rabbis do? Also, quick question, if anyone can answer for me. Who's been doing the magic so far? Who's teaching about magic?
The sages and the rabbis.
The sages and the rabbis, who all have this thing in common, which is that they are men. And they're doing magic. And are they being killed or being put to death? Distinctly not. They're actually teaching other people, other men, because men would be reading this, how to do these sorcery, the incantation. Keeping that in mind as we move forward. Sorcery, I don't even know how to describe this one, but I just want, maybe Daniel would like to read this one because it brings up his favorite use of sorcery. Maybe he has a farm.
You're picking on me again?
I am, because I think you'll like it.
Rabbi Eliezer described the incidents. Once, Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef and I were walking along the way, and he said to me, "My teacher, teach me about the planting of cucumbers." Oh, I see why you chose me now. I said one statement of sorcery, and the entire field became filled with cucumbers. He said to me, "My teacher, you have taught me about planting them. Teach me about uprooting them." I said one statement, and they were all gathered in one place. What was that statement? That sounds exciting.
I know, I wish you'd get into more detail, but we have in Sanhedrin, it's sorcery. Really, a sorcery via incantation just doesn't say what the incantation is, but it's that you can, earlier we saw the Mishnah that referenced this, sorcery that makes cucumbers come up. That's so weird. Well, here's the rabbis in the Talmud explaining, what is that story about sorcery that can both plant cucumbers and harvest cucumbers? And well, apparently it's very obvious. We all know the story. Rabbi Akiva ben Yosef, who has this story. And as we leave kind of incantations, I want to leave you with this thought, is that it's so not far-fetched that the rabbis were thinking about this and talking about this. Because what did we just read in the Torah this week? God spoke the world into being. The entire universe was created with words. And also a little bit later with Noah, the entire world was destroyed. Pretty much the entire world was destroyed with words too. And words can create and words can destroy. So it's not at all far-fetched that the rabbis were thinking about words and what they could do with words. Could they harvest food or make food come out of the ground? Could they destroy demons? It's really kind of logical in its own way. Let's learn about some potions though, because that seems like fun and kind of like Harry Potter. Oh, I didn't cite that one. Okay. Who wants to teach about some potions that Abaye is bringing from his family tradition? I know my voice is not this interesting. All
I'll
right,
read.
please.
Okay. Abiye said, "Mother told me these roasted grains are good for the heart and drive away worrisome thoughts." He went on, "One who suffers from weakness of the heart should go and bring the meat of the right thigh of a ram, and also bring the dung of grazing cattle from the month of Nisan. And if there is no cattle dung, he should bring willow twigs and then roast the meat on a fire made with the dung or twigs and eat it, and drink afterward some diluted wine. This will improve his condition."
So yeah, there's a lot going on in this one. It's just, I brought this because it's such an example of, there's so many like this. There are there's no point really including them all of them unless you want to really dive into these kind of, don't think they can be described in any way other than potions. And there's so many, and they're not all just, you can't even say, well, maybe it's recipes, because there's other ones of poultices, and if you combine this part of this animal and this part, and you squish them together, you put it on your eye, you put it on your forehead, you put it on your ear, and they cure all these different problems. And that's not, but you could say, oh, well, maybe it's like medicine to cure parts of your body. No, because they basically use them to kind of cure, emotional ailments or mental ailments. Even in the first example of Abaye saying, also, mother told me these grains are good for your heart and they drive away worrisome thoughts. What? And then he goes into this very convoluted thing where you take the meat and the thing, and it has to be this cattle that graze in this particular month. And a lot of our scholars, modern day scholars, look back at them, and there's so many examples like this. They look at these examples and they say, it's sorcery. They're potions. And it's fine. They're fine. There's no, oh my gosh, this is Abaye. He's one of the most brilliant minds that you will find in the Gemara. There's no concern that, oh my gosh, he's practicing sorcery. It's not sorcery. There is a difference between what they have this idea in their mind of, oh, this is bad, this is sorcery, this is bad, this is witchcraft, this is bad. Like, that's different. But what we're doing when we have incantations, when we are making these potions, it's fine. It's but it wasn't like a cognitive dissonance for them, I think, at all.
Can I ask a question?
Yes. Now I see why I didn't do. Yes.
So you're saying that if a witch came up with a potion, that was not okay, but this is okay. Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that in the examples that the Talmud is giving. Now, remember, the Talmud is not the be-all, end-all of what ancient Jewish life was like. It is one book, one volume of books, so to speak, but it's not, memoir from the time. There were lots of people doing lots of things, but you can see very clearly there's example after example after example in the Talmud of these kinds of potions being made by men for good use. And this is fine. And you see example after example after example of magic practiced by women that was not seen positively. There's a theory that it's because there's kind of this idea there's two kinds of magic. There's, science magic. This is magic that cures ailments. This is magic that, weakness of the heart and good for your, constitution. And then there's, folk magic. And because the rabbis didn't think of themselves as, these fringe, kind of religious figures. Like they were the rabbis. They were rational, reasonable people who were creating a structure in which to live your life Jewishly. They were not the fringe. They were the structure. But all that stuff that, so if they did it, it was in the structure. Any magic that they practiced was in the structure. It was formal. Stuff that happened on the outskirts, on the outside, which by default would end up being women because women weren't part of the, the structure that was making rules and decisions and writing books, so to speak. That stuff, the folk magic on the edges, the homeopathic, that stuff they don't like. And they attribute a lot of negativity to it. That being said, I don't want you to think they thought that only men did good magic and women did bad magic. That's not true, because you look at the example, they say men who practice bad magic, put him to death. They use masculine terms, necromancer and augur. Those are male terms, masculine. They use the masculine in the grammar. So they definitely think that men can practice bad magic and should certainly be put to death for it. So it's not clean cut, but you see certain, I think, and people much smarter than myself think, very strong kind of lines of thought through Jewish tradition and literature and Talmud specifically, and medievals. The medievals kind of argue with themselves about it, which is interesting. I forgot to label this last one, but it's another way to practice magic. Talking about the sages who knew, they're talking about demons, of course, and how do you keep away these shede? Well, you write an amulet, because that brings up this one example of the sages who heard demons talking, and they went, oh no, how do we deal with these demons? And they wrote an amulet. So amulets is a whole thing. I can't think of a better word for it than thing, but there's an entire kind of thought process as to how to write Jewishly amulets. You see a lot of it in like Chassidut and Kabbalah, like how do you write amulets? Amulets of protection against various and sundry things. And there are people who today will write amulets using apparently very ancient methodologies that I'm not familiar with because I'm too young to study Kabbalah. But yes, amulets are a huge thing. You see it definitely pop up, especially in mystical literature. Amulets. So there's incantation, there are potions, there are amulets. There's lots of ways to practice sorcery that there's nothing at all wrong with them. You see our own rabbis, our own sages, our own ancient rabbis practicing magic in all these ways, and there's nothing wrong with it. Which is interesting. Oh, we're on to ghosts. Great. I kind of want to go on to ghosts and then kind of take any kind of questions and comments after that, because I really do want to end in an hour. Jennifer, thoughts as to what I'm supposed to be doing right now?
Keep going.
Okay.
Let's go.
Oh no, I clicked. Okay. Spirits. This is complicated. We're going to do it in very broad strokes. No one knows, no one can agree what happens to you after you die. I don't think we can have a discussion about ghosts, about spirits, without saying that. There is no consensus. If you read through the Torah, there is literally nothing in there that says, well, and when you die, you go to heaven and God's on a throne and there's angels flying around your head. There's nothing in the Torah. There's nothing in the Torah about that. So there is a lot of thought because human beings often naturally were wondering what comes next. But / there's no consensus on it. What you see in a lot of different streams of thought that have streams of thought as to what happens after you die, that you're kind of made up of multiple parts. One part is your body. And this is just its casing. It's nice casing. We're glad to have the casing. But when you die, it's really the body part that dies. Your body just can't keep going anymore. And that goes back into the ground. There's really not a lot of discussion brooked about that. Then we often think, well, there's body and then there's soul. But a lot of thoughts in Judaism, and I am pulling a lot from Chassidut kind of right now, Kabbalah, because I think it's ironically the most straightforward, is that you kind of have these other, not just one other part, but two other parts. One is you kind of got this God spark, which I like to call soul, just because it makes more sense to me. And when you die, your body dies. When your body dies, and you are put in the ground within 24 hours, hopefully, theoretically, or really anybody, and you got the God spark in you, a little piece of divinity that you carry around with you all the time, and that goes back to God. And what happens to it after that, who knows? But then there's this other part of you. There is a spirit. And it's not your body, because it's a body's body. And it's not the God spark, because the God spark is the God part, goes back to God. But there's a spirit. And this idea, even though we don't have a consensus on Jewishly as to what happens to you after you die, I really do think that this idea has infused itself into mainstream Judaism. And my theory about it is because you look at the Mourner's Kaddish. Why do we say the Mourner's Kaddish? I keep clicking, this is what happens. Why do we say the Mourner's Kaddish? We say it, well, there's a variety of reasons. But if you look at the tradition of saying Mourner's Kaddish, and you look at the discussions about what happens after you die, and you look at who's saying these things, which is the rabbis in the Gemara, there's this idea that after you die, your spirit goes somewhere, but it doesn't go to its final place. It goes to Sheol, or it goes to be judged. And it stays there for, it really depends on how you like to interpret these things and which stories you like, 11 or 12 months. What happens 11 or 12 months after someone dies? Traditionally in Judaism, we put up their headstone. There you go. It's interesting how all this kind of dovetails so nicely. What is the part of them that is being judged that hasn't really settled yet? Well, it can't be the body, because the body we bury. Can't be the God spark, because it goes back to God. There's an idea that there's this spirit, and it's hovering around. You're not really sure where. Some sources like to say it's literally at the grave. Some say it follows people. There's a lot there. And some say it never really settles. Some say that the spirit part of a person, after their body has died, goes on to wherever it needs to go to after the 11 or 12 month period is up, but then sometimes will come back. Some say the Kever Avot ceremony that we do during the first part of Elul or between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is because this idea that, that the spirits of the people we love are hovering around their graves. And so we go to visit their graves during this time, we do the Kever Avot, so we can go kind of be with them. Now, none of these things are halachic, but they're certainly there in Jewish tradition. And so to say that all Jews don't believe that there's in spirits, let me bring in some proof texts for you that show that I believe very clearly that Jewish tradition has spirits in it. I love my titles because they're funny, but pretty much only to me. Everyone loves Shabbat dinner. This is a straight up ghost story out of the Talmud. Somebody, anybody? So say, why don't you stay in our time limit? No, probably not, actually. Who wants to read about Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, who, by the way, is the redactor, the great redactor of the text. And everyone revered him. So he was called the Prince Nasi. Love this guy. Elizabeth, can you read our ghost story about Shabbat dinner? Everyone loves Shabbat dinner.
Oh, you want me to read?
Please.
Okay. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi commanded his sons, "My lamp shall be lit in its usual place, my table should be set in its usual place, and the bed should be arranged in its usual place." The Gemara asks, what is the reason he made these requests? The Gemara explains, every Shabbat Eve, even after his passing, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi would come to his house as he had done during his lifetime, and he therefore wished for everything to be set up as usual.
This is part of a much longer section about Rabbi Yehuda Nassi's kind of final wishes that when he was dying, actively dying, and he called in his sons and said, this is what you need to do with my house, this is how you need to take care of my wife, etc., etc. And there's this little that's a little tidbit they just throw in there, and it just I love it because it says every Shabbat evening, Shabbat dinner, the table is set, the lamp is lit, the bed is arranged. Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi the great rabbi. So we're not talking like a scary spirit or a demonical ghost. No, he just wanted to come home and have Shabbat dinner with his family, even after he had died. And I think of that when I don't know, just for what my job, when I get the privilege of talking to people, a lot of people, when they are dealing with the passing of a loved one. And when we, I check in and they say, oh, we were having the Seder, we were having Shabbat dinner, or, like my child's graduation, or all these things. And I felt, I felt my mom there. I knew my dad was there. Is that an extension of just how much they missed this person? And they felt them? I don't know, maybe. Did they really feel their spirit because the person's spirit was there? I don't know, maybe. I'm just saying, we see it in the Talmud. And what about if you wanted to interact with spirits? Oh, I translated it into English. Boo. Okay, well, I'll talk to you about the Hebrew. I'm gonna read through this one. The Gemara, the Talmud asks, talking about in the book of Daniel, when they kind of have visions. Daniel and these other folks have visions. And, well, Daniel had the vision. These other folks, they didn't have a vision, but they were still scared. What was the reason that they were frightened? And the Gemara answers itself, is Daniel from the book of Daniel. Although they did not see the vision, it says their guardian angels saw it. So this is a little interesting text. This is a real text study for y'all. And they were overcome with fear and they fled. But if you look over in the Gemara, in the Aramaic on the side, it's saying mazal. And Rav Steinsaltz, God bless him, he just passed, which is devastating, translated as guardian angels. But a lot of other rabbis translated it straight to say that it's mazal. They're mazal. These men who saw this vision, they didn't see the same vision Daniel saw, but they saw something. But it wasn't even that they saw it. Their mazal saw this, and they were overcome with fear and they fled. You should conclude from it, in the case of a person who becomes frightened with no apparent cause, although they don't see what causes the spirits, because their mazal sees it. And so from this, we can really extrapolate, and other rabbis do this, not just myself, that there is a part of us that can sense otherworldliness. When I don't know, you're walking back in the old days when people used to actually go out, and you're walking around at night and you just feel like, there's something there. The rabbis and later scholars as well would say, perhaps that's because there's a part of you that can sense that. Again, don't look at guardian angel. I'm sorry, I used Steinsaltz, and he just translated it. I don't like that one, and other rabbis would agree. There's some part of you that can sense spirits or the supernatural. The example they specifically bring up here is something negative, but there are those who would say there's just part of you that can sense anything that is otherworldly. And just because I knew someone would bring it up, and we have 4 minutes according to my clock that I keep right over there, I want to talk about Dybbuk. Very famous. Pointing now, we're going way, way, way later. These is medieval period, pretty much. There's these two kinds of ideas, and I'm sure a lot of us have heard of the Dybbuk. That's where the picture is from. It's very famous. But there's also an Ibor, which I find fascinating. Two very different kinds of ideas, both related to kind of spirits taking possession of bodies specifically, and very, very different. And Ibor is a righteous person, and this righteous person's soul, their spirit, like they're not their God, as Parker exactly, but like their spirit occupies, like possesses a living person. It's temporary, and it simply gloms onto the soul that's already there. And the living person may be aware that this is happening. They might not be aware. This is an Ibor. And often the living person consents to this happening. So that's kind of a nice positive aspect. A righteous soul comes back, enters into a living person's body. The Kabbalists took this and said that it's in order to kind of finish work that wasn't done. The Dybbuk, same, but also very different. The Dybbuk is a dislocated soul. It's often translated as like a kind of a malevolent, if not positive. but they, a Dybbuk forcibly occupies a living person's body. It is a possession. When there's these stories about, exorcisms and such things, that, like modern day movies, and they've taken the idea of a Dybbuk and they've kind of run away with it. But I think they made it into worse than it is, because probably that's what, sells movie tickets. But a Dybbuk is not positive. It certainly is negative. It's a kind of like an unsettled soul that's become dislocated from where it's supposed to be, forces its way into a living person's body until whatever it's supposed to do is done. And it's really hard to boot them out. There are Jews who perform exorcisms. I am not touching that with a 10-foot pole, either in practice or in theory. So I just wanted to do that because I knew someone would bring in Dybbuks at some point. If you walk away from this, I told you I'd blitz you through it. If you walk away from this kind of class with nothing else, it's one, our ancient rabbis did not forbid or to build on the Torah prohibitions against witchcraft and sorcery and communing with ghosts or spirits because they thought those things were pretend. Absolutely not. They knew these things were real. They had other reasons for trying to dissuade Jews from doing it. That being said, if you look in the Talmud, there is what I think it's very clearly, and people, again, scholars much smarter than myself, say is it really is magic. You can call it something else. But if you're doing incantations to drive away demons, or you're writing amulets, or you are making potions, I think it's just magic. It's just magic that you like. And spirits, the idea that there are spirits, that there is a spirit part of a person that continues on after their body has died, and that spirit can actually be around us on earth, certainly Jewish. I'm not saying go out and practice magic and go out and try and commune with spirits, because you shouldn't do that for a variety of reasons. But, if you do have experiences in any of those realms, you're not crazy, I don't think, because look at us as Jews. It exists in all of our texts. And I'm happy to take questions. I will do my best to answer them. I am surprisingly not an authority on Jewish witchcraft or ghosts in Judaism, but I have read a good amount of stuff, and I really appreciate you taking the time to learn about my niche interests with me. So thank you. Happy to take questions.
So I have a question.
Please, I'll try my best.
If we believe that God is one and that God is in control of the world, where do the demons come from in the first place?
Oh, I know. That's like the rabbi's big, their big issue with any of this was that you might start to think that any of these things being given weight could possibly diminish from God's oneness and God's grandeur, because, well, if there could be demons, then are there rivals for God's power? Like that was probably one of the chief concerns of the rabbis, is if people start messing around with witchcraft, they're going to think that they can do like God does, and they did not want people doing that, or to consult with ghosts. They're like, that, leave it alone, leave it for God. So I think that definitely speaks to one of the rabbis' big anxiety as to why. Well, I mean, the Torah itself says don't mess around with this stuff. Why? Because the Torah is concerned with making everybody into monotheistic Jews, which makes sense. I'm a big fan. As to the question of where do demons come from, well, this is every time I say this, it should be its own class. It really should be its own class. But there's Lilith. She's considered the mother of many demons. There's a demon king, Asmodeus. Nobody, we don't believe in like a Satan. There's no equivalent, of course, of God's power. It's not like there's a good and an evil and they're at war per se. Jewish demonology includes in it kind of, demons that get close. There are other demon powers, and they are there. If you do a demonology, which you don't, this all isn't part and parcel. Not like, if you do accept this one, you have to accept everything. Like you can take or leave demonology, but there's a lot of demonology in Judaism. Good question. I feel like Daniel. Okay, I see you're raising your hand. I hate Zoom. Okay, Daniel, I see you raising your hand. You just unmute yourself and say whatever it is that you want to say.
Okay. Clearly, I mean, you've convinced me that in Talmudic times, biblical times, all during there, the idea of demons, witches, etc., were quite well known. It seems pretty clear to me that in the last 200 or 300 years, they aren't as well accepted. When did Judaism move away from this magic period to this other period? What caused that to disappear?
Such an interesting question. It's hard. I would say, just thinking about in terms of the length of Jewish history, we've had kind of mythology and demonology and superstition, all these things for longer than we haven't. Like way longer than we haven't. You know, the medieval period and the, you know, we picked up stuff from the Christians and the Muslims, and we lived in their lands with a lot of stuff. And first of all, it's still definitely strong today. Chassidut and Hasidism and you know, the mystical folks, you know. Though the Satmar Rebbe was actually kind of famous because someone came to him and said, "I'm being possessed by a demon." And he literally said, "You need psychological help. You need to go get help," which I always thought was really kind of forward thinking of him. It's got to probably be like the Haskalah, the great the Enlightenment. And you start to see Jews, and you know, like Napoleon, when Jews started to get accepted into kind of secular society. Though Jews have been, you know, we were into demons and all the different mythologies for, I don't know, I'd say it's never really gone away. Jews who live in secular society will behave like secular Jews. Society today says that there are no demons that exist in your water. Okay, so no demons in your water at night. But I don't know, there's plenty of Jews who still believe that. There's a reason why halakha says you have to keep your water covered, and water that's left out over 24 hours you can't drink anymore. Could be demons, could be scorpions. So I don't know. I think maybe the answer is we've never really fully outgrown it.
Okay, thank you.
Good question. I have to think about it. Any other questions? You're also free to leave because it's 9:05 and I realize that. So like, feel free to go. If anyone else has questions, feel free to ask. Try to remember everything I know about demons, witches. Oh, thank you. Everybody saying thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thanks for listening. It's a pleasure. You're welcome. You're welcome. She did it in an hour. Jennifer, how proud of me are you? I'm proud of me. I could do a whole class on like women and witchcraft. There's a whole like you could just do like amulets and numerology. I didn't even touch on numerology. Ooh, gematria. I don't want to do gematria.
You don't?
18 means hi, it's life. Hooray.
Okay, I know that.
I'll stick to that one. No, I mean I have a whole book. I need to like find it. I think I left it at my parents' house, but it's a whole book about numerology.
So what do you think about the whole power thing?
Sorry, say again?
I said, what do you think about the whole power thing, that women couldn't have the witchcraft because they would be controlling men, and women,
I mean, it's hard not to like read that, to see that in there, because you're seeing men. That's why I want you to say like, look at all the magic that men do, because and it's not feared at all. I mean, if you also have to think like, what is Gemara? Who's the Gemara talking to? We talk about this in rabbinical school all the time. Who are they talking to? And we don't all agree, but either the Gemara are the very, educated rabbis talking to, the literate, learned crowds, which would be men in charge of households who could impart that knowledge to others, but men. at large, or it's, you know, the elite. It's an elitist document. We always hated that idea, like, oh, it's an elitist document, it's the Gemara. But or it's rabbis talking to, you know, essentially each other. Either way, it's not, they're not really talking to women. I think it's pretty clear that they're not talking to women. And so when you look at how they talk about women performing magic, it's not like, you know, when men perform magic, like they're either good or bad, but you just don't see women performing magic for good. I looked, I couldn't find it. Kat.
So there's well, two things is like with the amulets, there was the incantation bowls, like in ancient Babylon, and then also in Yoma, I forget where in Parakate, there's a bit about how like you have to wash your hands before you handle food, because if you eat food that was touched by unwashed hands, then you, like, a demon comes and then you get sick and could die. So
Oh yeah, I mean, if you want to list that stuff, there's,
yeah, I'm sure,
you know,
I'm sure a ton.
you have to bury your fingernails when you cut them. Why?
Yes.
Because demons like to live in fingernails, obviously. The clippings,
Yeah.
not like when they're attached to you. That, we all know that. Yeah, Gemara through the medievals, full of this. I mean, Sefer Hasidim is like full of ghost stories. But I think Liz's point is a really interesting one. I think we really do have to, like, you know, take seriously. It's like, were they talking about power structure? Were they really worried? Maybe both. I don't know. What do you think, Liz?
Well, I mean, when they were talking about the men doing it, it was more the creatures that are not, we can't see. But I felt like, okay, we're talking about bread. Women, it was bread. And we might do something to their food. And then that would be something that maybe, that's what I was thinking of, the controlling, that their women might make men do things that they wouldn't normally do, or put them in, so it's in a different level that they were talking about women and what men were doing. So men were protecting against.
Right, yeah, protecting against demons, protecting against sickness, protecting against, yeah, interesting. Yeah, you look at the examples, I'm trying to think of all the, like, other ones, not all of them, but, like, you know, the ones I can remember off the top of my head is when, like, women practicing witchcraft, and it was usually, you know, to hurt, to cause a hurt. And I mean, there's a lot of stuff from, like, you know, making milk curdle to, you know, causing miscarriages, which kind of, to me, rings of, like, Salem. Like, oh, she walked by my field and all the plants died. And you're like, what? It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and it made, I mean, that, they were learned in the Bible. So both, for them, both books, so could have come from some of that. I just think what is interesting is we say in the Torah it says, don't do this. But as you said, there's clearly, oh yeah, well, we don't want you to do this, but we're going to. And so it's just really juxtaposition as to, okay, it's okay, because you say it's okay, but really we can't, but God says, don't do that, but we're going to do it anyways. But we're going to disguise it, but you shouldn't do this.
Yeah, it's interesting that the Torah literally has like 5 different, what I would think are 5 different terms for the same thing. It can't be an augur, a soothsayer, a diviner. Like, okay, but like those are all basically the same thing, is that you're talking about people who tell the future and you're not supposed to do it. Oh, but then we're going to talk about how you can use these stones. You're like, but you just said don't do it. And it is interesting how they manage to exempt themselves from punishment. Again, still saying there's a category. This is what you can't do, but there's this other stuff.
Yeah.
That you can do.
Yeah. There's always this loophole within Judaism.
We're Jewish. We love loopholes. It's why we're all like lawyers, you know, except for like me and you and a bunch of other people. But we're a lot of lawyers. I think we're inclined towards it.
Yeah. Well, look how many lawyers become rabbis.
Ariel did take the LSATs.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
could have been. I could have been married to a lawyer. A lawyer.
Yeah, well,
Instead, I married a rabbi.
well, two rabbis arguing with law, you know, but it's Jewish law.
They
So,
really do, actually. Everyone's like, "You really do that at home?" And I want to say, like, no, but they do. So we really are just boring. That's what it comes down to.
no, that's okay.
Any other questions, comments, counter sermons? Cool.
Okay, this is good.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for putting up with how fast I have to talk to make it happen.
That's okay.
And Jennifer, don't close because I didn't look at all the comments and I want to make sure I didn't miss anybody asking me a question or saying something that I should respond
Good
to.
night.
Good night.
Bye. Bye. Good to see y'all. I know it's all good. Leave a meeting. Oh, no, they're all good. They're all fine comments. Nobody panicking. So thanks, Jennifer.